So let me talk about another feature of utilitarianism, another issue that crops up, I think, when you look at the effective altruists. But I don't think the article in New Yorker quite explains this as well as it should. I mean, whatever, you can't fault him for this. The guy's trying to tell a story. Not a philosopher, right? I also don't think a lot of people, a lot of philosophers who talk about utilitarianism say enough about this, and I do fault them a little bit more. But it's actually really important. And this feature of utilitarianism is that utilitarianism does not draw a distinction between doing something and letting it happen. For a utilitarian, all that matters are consequences. All that matters is what happens. It doesn't matter how we bring those consequences about or how we're involved in what happens. Now, you might be saying to yourselves, well, so what? Or you might not be understand what I'm getting at. But I think this is a big deal, and let me say why. When we are pushed or we are presented with cases, most of us think that there is an important moral difference between doing versus letting happen. We usually think that doing something bad to another person is much harder to justify than letting something bad happen to them. Let me give you guys an example. Think back to my ventilator case that I gave you on that quiz, right? If we do not give the ventilator to the 70-year-old, we let him die, right? And that seems perfectly justifiable if it's him or the 20-year-old, right? It is justifiable to say, well, why are we depriving you or your loved one of a ventilator? Well, because we need it to save a younger person who has more life left, who has a better prognosis, so on and so forth. Now that might, when you think about saying that to somebody, it might seem a little iffy, but think about what sounds way worse is if you said, well, imagine that the 70-year-old is already on a ventilator, he's recuperating, seems to be doing okay, but we run out of ventilators and we get a 20-year-old come in. Would you say that we should disconnect, kick the 70-year-old off the ventilator even though doing it will kill him so we can hook the 20-year-old up? Some people will say, yeah, what's different? But I think a lot of you listening to this, a lot of people when I do this in in-person classes will say, no, these are different. If you just don't put the guy on the ventilator, you let him die. Yeah, you don't help him. But if you take somebody who's already on a ventilator off, you are killing them. You are the cause of their death by kicking them off the ventilator, right? Or, slightly more out there, science fiction, whatever case. But imagine that, well, the first case isn't, the second case is science fiction. Imagine you had to give a liver, you have a liver that's been donated, or sorry, let's say a kidney, right? Kidney donated for transplant, and you have to pick between two candidates. One is perfectly healthy, except for the kidney. The other has a lot of other health problems, and what's more, you know that he is an addict. Very likely he's had a couple overdoses already. You think to yourself, well, if I give him the kidney, other health problems might intervene. What's more, he might just go ahead, overdose, and die. Who should you pick? A lot of people would say in this case, give it to the healthier person who is not an addict, right? You can justify this. You can justify letting the less healthy addict die because the other person has a better prognosis. Well, imagine though that you have an addict with some health problems who has perfectly healthy kidneys, though his health problems haven't affected those yet. And you have a non addicted, healthy person with no health problems who needs a kidney. Could you, would you think that it is okay to kill the addict and take his kidneys to help this person who needs a kidney? Heck, you could even help one more person, right? He's got 2 kidneys. Practically no one would think that you should, right? Why? There is a difference between letting this one person die and killing this other. It is much, much harder to justify killing someone. Most of us think in some cases you can justify it, but it is much, much harder to justify killing someone than it is letting someone die. Utilitarians, all they care about are consequences, so they think there is really no difference between killing and letting die. And this comes up, when you hear the utilitarian say, if you can save, these effective altruists, well, if you could save somebody's life and you don't, you've killed them. Well, if you really think that there's no difference between killing and letting die, that is true. But I think most of us do think there's a difference between killing and letting die. I mean, think of it this way, right? If I walk down the street and I see your house on fire and I don't call the fire department, that is a shabby, shabby thing to do. But I haven't harmed you, right? On most accounts. If I didn't walk by and see the smoke coming out the window, well, it would have burned down, right? If I see someone drowning in the water and I don't save them, well, that is a shabby thing to do, but me being there hasn't made them worse off. If no one were there, they would drown in the same way, right? If I could help someone and I don't, that is often a bad thing, but it is very different, most of us think, than actually harming them, right? If I push you in the water, even accidentally, I am the cause of your situation. You are worse off because I am there. If I accidentally set your house on fire, you are worse off because I am in the vicinity of your house. If someone is drowning and I just don't save them, that might be a bad thing to do, but they are not worse off because I am there. If I see someone's house burning and I don't do anything, that is again a shabby thing to do, but the person whose house is burning is not worse off because I'm there, right? If I weren't there, the same thing would happen. Utilitarians deny all of this. Letting the house burn, same as burning it down because it has the same consequences. A house is burned down, right? Not saving someone from drowning when you can do it without much risk to yourself is more or less the same as pushing them in the water. Why? Consequences are the same. A person dies either way. That seems pretty odd to me. I do think this distinction between doing and letting happen is important. If you deny it, there's a lot of judgments we make ordinarily you can't make sense of. Like that it is very much justified to prefer giving a healthy person without an addiction a kidney over someone who has health problems and an addiction, while it is murder to kill the addict, to take his kidney, to give it to a healthy person. You need that killing versus letting die distinction. Now, when presented with cases like this, what utilitarians will say is, well, that's a weird out there case in the real world. Well, you should never kill people to take their organs because, well, how are you going to get the organ? And even if you could get away with it, you'll probably get caught and then it's not worth it. God, if you're a doctor, people will never trust doctors again. So probably in the real world, when you think about all the consequences, it's not worth killing people to harvest their organs. That might be true. It's a weird answer. It's much more commonsensical to say, no, you shouldn't do that because it is much, much harder to justify killing someone than it is to let them die. More generally, when you start to give this answer that it doesn't matter how you are involved in what happens, it only matters what happens, you start to get some weird answers elsewhere. Bernard Williams, this philosopher who's very critical of utilitarianism, throws out a few cases that he thinks they give some just bizarre answers. He thinks these are counterexamples to utilitarianism. And one of them is, this is slightly adapted, but a case like this, right? Imagine that you get out of college, you have a degree in biology, and you think that biological weapons are just the worst thing in the world. And a friend of yours says, well, okay, I have an in at the bioweapons factory over there. I can get you a job. You can be making money helping us grow anthrax tomorrow, right? And of course, most of us would say, look, if I think biological weapons are evil, if I think they're wrong, why in the world would I take this job? And your friend might say, well, look, somebody's got to take it, right? Somebody's got to take it. I know you're a good guy. I know that you hate biological weapons. I know that not only will you put the money you get from this job to a good use, if you take the job, you'll half-ass it. You'll do the job as badly as possible without getting fired because you don't want to work on chemical weapons. If they hire somebody else, biological weapons, if they hire somebody else, man, he might be enthusiastic about the job. Yeah, it's just, it's win-win, right? You get the money, the job is done as badly as possible. What's the big issue? And the big issue is like, look, I am working for an organization for an end that I think is terrible. Why would I do that? Now, this is slightly, a little bit out there, a little bit fanciful, but you see people in the article doing the same thing, right? This whole idea, earn to give. And you did get effective altruists who are recommended to take jobs in industries that they think are immoral, right? Should you work for ExxonMobil? Well, if you think global warming is a big deal, as most effective altruists do, you would probably think, well, Exxon is doing terrible things to the world. No. But effective altruists actually said, it's like, well, look, somebody's got to take these jobs. If you take it, you can be a good, effective altruist, follow the gospel of Peter Singer and give your money away to poor people half the world over. If somebody else takes the job, somebody's going to take the job. Somebody else takes it, they'll just keep that money for themselves. That seems weird to me. Even if the reasoning is right, that seems really, really weird to me. Now, it was enough of an embarrassment to them that they started to say, well, don't take jobs with oil companies, but they still said generally earn to give, even if the business is morally neutral to immoral. You can earn money. You can give it away as a good utilitarian. Someone's going to do this job, be it a banker or financial trader, whatever. If you are a good utilitarian and you take it, you can at least give the money away. That seems fairly odd to me. It does seem to me that it matters how you're involved in this. And if you working for Evil Corp has better consequences because you'll give the money away and you won't do as good a job for Evil Corp as somebody else does, still seems kind of weird to me, right? Well, let me give you another real world case. I had a friend who was thinking about going into law, and he got a job as a paralegal working for this company. that was doing mesothelioma cases, and they were doing mesothelioma cases on the side of the defendant, the company that was getting sued. And my friend said, his whole job consisted of going to these people who were suffering, lung cancer, um, emphysema, just suffering horribly, often dying from their exposure to asbestos, right? And he was talking to these guys, basically taking their depositions in the hope that they would slip up and the company he was working for could lower the settlement in some way, right? Now my friend felt terrible. He stopped doing it. You know, he said that he basically came home every day and wanted to cry, which I think is a normal human reaction, right? But imagine if you were a utilitarian, if you were a good, effective altruist, if you said, no, 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 don't worry. Look, somebody's going to do this job. The law firm is going to hire somebody. Whether, he was a paralegal, but even if you're the lawyer, they're going to hire some lawyer. Somebody is going to be on the side of the people who exposed these workers to asbestos and gave them cancer and emphysema. Somebody's going to do that job. You shouldn't feel guilty because somebody's going to do it. What matters is whether you give your income away or not, because not everybody would do that. If you give your income away, all's fine, all's good. Think about this, right? If my friend says, well, look, no, I know somebody's going to do it. It matters that it's me talking to these poor people. It matters that it's me trying to get them to slip up so we can harm them even more and not give them the settlement they deserve. It matters that it's me that's doing it. That's just something that doesn't register to a utilitarian. Utilitarians say that, why does it matter that it's you? All that matters is the consequences, and the consequences here, somebody's going to do it. Somebody's going to be doing this to these people. It's better consequences because if you do it, at least you'll give your money away to help people half a world away. I don't know. For me, that seems very disturbing. That seems very off. I think people like Williams have a point. I think utilitarianism starts to sound very odd here.